Welcome into the On3 studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. It is the Wiltfong Whip Around with Steve Wiltfong. Today is Thursday, June 6th, and I am your host, Josh Newberg. Now, Monday's show, we wrapped up the visits from last weekend, so today's show, naturally, it's going to be more of a look ahead at the slate of visits this weekend, and there are some big ones. But before we get into it, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruit channel, your best source of recruiting, and anywhere on YouTube. So make sure you guys are all subscribed. All right. Bring on the great Steve Wiltfong. Now, Steve, we're going to get into all these visits, but first, I got to get your thoughts on Keelon Russell. Yesterday, big news came out. He flipped his commitment from SMU to Alabama. Alabama gets their guy. Why do you like this fit?
Well, it's QB1 for Alabama this class. As soon as spring football wrapped up, Kalen DeBoer's staff went on the road, and he was one of the first quarterbacks that they went and saw. Nick Sheridan, Jamarcus Shepard, co-offensive coordinators went down to Duncanville, fell in love, immediately prioritized him, had regular dialogue with him, got into campus this past weekend, and now he's in the fold. The class at On3 ranks number 6 nationally, and now they attack the rest of this offensive class. I got some key receiver targets out there, Josh, that are going to visit at the end of the month, in Caleb Cunningham and Derek Meadows. They're in the middle of it for some of the best offensive linemen in the country. They're battling LSU for Micah DeBose. DeBose took an official visit to LSU over the weekend. He already returned to Alabama's campus since then, still has his official later in the month. That maybe looks like Alabama perhaps could have the edge over LSU. Jackson Lloyd, one of the most coveted offensive linemen in the country from California, Ohio State and Alabama, USC battling there. And then 5-star offensive tackle Ty Haywood was on campus last weekend. Sounds like that went really well. They're in on some top running backs from Shakai Mills Knight, a ferocious 215, 220-pound back from Tennessee, who's taking his official visit this weekend. They just had Jordan Davison on campus. Keelon Russell gives them kind of a lightning rod recruit, a state champion from the state of Texas, played maybe the best high school competition in the country. He wants that big stage in college. He flips from SMU to Alabama. Alabama pushing for a top 5 class.
All right, we're going to start things off in Georgia, where they have a massive visit weekend. But first, there was some big news that dropped on Wednesday. Our colleague, Chad Simmons, he broke the news. Number 1 linebacker, Zayden Walker from Ellaville, Georgia, was committing to the Dogs. Now, this is the second 5-star commitment for Kirby Smart and UGA in the 2025 cycle. Walker visited Georgia over the weekend. He had great things to say coming out of that trip, but he didn't commit. He took 24 to 36 hours to think things over, and then today he let Chad Simmons put out the big news that he was a dog. So go check that video out with Chad and I on Zayden Walker. I'll link it in the description below. But UGA now sits at number 6 in the On3 industry rankings, just outside the top 5. But here come the Dogs. All right, let's bring on Steve Wiltfong. And before we get into the visit weekend, you made some news this week. You put in a pick for Isaiah Gibson, who is committed to USC, but you see him flipping. Explain that pick, and is it something that you see coming to fruition soon, or just an outlook for the future?
I just think it's something that I think is ultimately going to happen. Him and his mom family were back on campus this past weekend for his official visit to Georgia. And I think coming out of that trip, Isaiah sees himself succeeding at Georgia with their track record of player development. Got back around Coach Chidera, Uzo Deribe, Coach Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann, and that coaching staff. And I think that the stars are beginning to align for Georgia ultimately to land Isaiah Gibson. Now, there's still plenty of competition. Obviously, he's committed to USC, set to take an official visit to South Carolina this weekend. There's a few others in play, but this is a very coveted target for Georgia, Kirby Smart and company. And I wouldn't be surprised if this one wraps up kind of similar to the way it did for KJ Bolden, the top-ranked safety in the country last year, who flipped from Florida State to Georgia late in the process. Everybody knew KJ Bolden was probably going to flip. Was it going to be Auburn? Was it going to be Georgia? I think we think Isaiah Gibson's going to flip. Is it going to be somewhere else in the SEC or Georgia? I think it's going to be the Bulldogs when all's said and done.
All right, now let's focus back on campus this weekend. Now, I told you Zayden Walker committed. He joins Jordan Perlotti on that linebacker commit list for the Dogs, but I talked to Rusty Mansell of Dogs HQ today. He told me they're taking at least one more, and there are 2 elite linebackers on campus this weekend, Tavian Wallace and Ty Jackson. How do you see this one playing out? Do you think maybe Georgia could land them both? Is there one that you think they're in better in position with than the other?
Well, I think that they could land both. You talked about Jaden Perlotti. There's a chance Jaden Perlotti doesn't sign with Georgia.
That's
And then Luke Metz is another one that's on the board right now for Georgia, and Alabama linebacker commit. But Tavian Wallace, Ty Jackson, those are two guys that Georgia has invested a lot of time in as we head into the summer of the process. We got a chance to spend a lot of time with Ty Jackson and his family at the On3 Elite Series, and there's no question that Georgia is one of the front runners for him going into this weekend's official visit. I think Alabama is another program that he's super high on as he continues through his process and tries to figure out where he's going to go. Tavian Wallace, my On3 RPM, is on Florida State right now. Mm-hmm. I know at the On3 Elite Series, he said that Florida was the biggest challenger to Florida State. He did grow up a Gators fan, but it's just hard for me to ignore Georgia. Glenn Schumann has done a fantastic job in this process. And Tavian Wallace, his brother out of Kentucky, just got drafted in the 3rd round, Trevin Wallace. Mm-hmm. And I think he wants to go higher. It's like a personal goal. Well, Georgia can point towards numerous first-round linebackers that have been selected. And so I think that's something that puts them in good position here too with Tavian Wallace. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Jaden Perlotti. They definitely have Zayden Walker in the fold, who kind of fits that rugged physical play style that Georgia has. He can run. He's tough. He hits hard. Also looks good on offense on the high school level. Now they're all in on Tavian Wallace and Ty Jackson, and it's a big official visit weekend for both of them.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens there. More top talent in Athens. Here we go. Couple 5-stars at the top of this list, and David Sanders and DJ Pickett. David Sanders coming off that Clemson visit. We know he's not in a position to make a decision anytime soon. He's going to take all his visits, but this is a really important one, huh?
Well, I think Georgia's always been at or near the top of his list, and he said as much to you at the On3 Elite Series. Now, we've had some pulse changes or some teams that we think are hot in this process, but Georgia has maintained consistency throughout as one of the top programs. He was recently back on campus for the Kirby Smart scavenger hunt. Now he comes in for his official visit. And I talked to a source today that felt like Georgia and Tennessee were the two front runners. Now, I'm certainly not sleeping on Ohio State. I also think that they are one of the teams in the lead. We talked about this on Inside Scoop yesterday, Josh, that those are the 3 programs I'm watching the most right now. Bulldogs, Buckeyes, and Vols. We'll see if Alabama can make a move with their official visit. He was just at Clemson. Obviously, he loves Clemson. They're have always been a school under serious consideration. But Georgia's one that I think has a great chance to land him. It's another big visit. And Georgia's bringing back their commit, Mason Short, who David Sanders has built a really good friendship with. Mason's going to be back on campus this weekend. They hung out at the scavenger hunt. Mm-hmm. So David, as he gets comfortable with the players in the locker room, they already like Coach Searles. Going to spend a lot of more time with Kirby Smart, and they're going to hammer home player development. That's going to be a big thing for Georgia and how they've been able to take their 5-star offensive lineman and turn around, and they're in the first round of the NFL draft 3 to 4 years later.
All right, DJ Pickett, he's the next up on our list. Now, he's the 5-star cornerback from the state of Florida, and DJ Pickett told me, don't sleep on Oregon. That's what he said when we were in Nashville for the Elite Series, but I don't think many people are sleeping on Oregon when it comes to DJ Pickett, but I do think that maybe if there's a dark horse, I won't call him a sleeper, but if there's a dark horse in this recruitment, I think it's kind of Georgia. I think people know that Miami's involved. People know that LSU's involved. People know that Oregon's involved, but I don't think Georgia is given the credit in DJ Pickett's recruitment. What are you hearing heading into this one?
Well, I think coming into this one, I think it's safe to say that they trail some of the other ones that we've been high on and speaking on a lot. You know, he's coming off his official visit to LSU. I would probably give them the momentum, even coming into that official visit. He's had a couple other great visits to Baton Rouge where he feels at home. Corey Raymond, that connection. The family knows Patrick Peterson, et cetera, et cetera. Family's got all those ties to Miami. If Miami has a great year, we think it could be hard for him to say no to Miami. The family then came back and said, well, same thing with Florida. So if Florida has a great year, that first game, he is going to be at that Florida-Miami game. It is going to be electric to open the season. And that is going to be a game that could move the needle with a lot of in-state recruits. I'm so fired up for Florida, Miami to start the season. And Pickett's taking his official visit for that one. Now, Georgia, there was a time last fall where I thought that Pickett was close to committing to Florida because of Corey Raymond being in Florida at the time. But Fran Brown used to be the defensive backs coach at Georgia, and they were in early on Pickett and got him to campus a couple times. And if Fran Brown were still the defensive back coach at Georgia, I don't think there'd be a better relationship in the country than DJ Pickett and Fran Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd be talking about Georgia's position with DJ Pickett a lot differently. But a lot of the other stuff about Georgia still remains. The track record of player development, Kirby Smart's background as a DB coach and all that. So they're going to get on campus. His dad hasn't been there. They haven't had a chance to see Georgia practice, things like that. So I think that they're going to get an inside look at the program, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking more about Georgia coming out. DJ's not making a decision till the fall. So that gives, if this is a great visit, that gives them more time to get back to Athens another time after this.
I was recently introduced to Roback, and I couldn't be more excited. When I say impressed by the quality and comfort, I mean it. I literally can't take this stuff off since trying it on. For starters, the Roback polos are my favorite polos. They not only have fun designs for every occasion and season, but they fit perfectly and easily transition throughout the day. Roback's everyday shorts are the perfect pairing as well. They are so comfortable and have an elastic waistband and great fabric that is made to stretch. Finally, the Roback hoodie is by far my favorite piece of clothing I own. It is so comfortable. I wear this to start my day, end my day, and everything in between. Easy to be active in it or just relax. The hoodie will fit whatever the day has in store. They have also released a ton of new products. Between their brand new Tailwind tees and bathing suits, Roback is ready for the warm weather. Roback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with college stars Jalen Milroe, Cade Klubnik, among many others that are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes. Use the code STEVE on Roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers through the end of this week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code STEVE.
All right. Now, Edge Jared Smith, he's also going to be on campus this weekend, and his recruitment is heating up. I think this one, by the end of summer, is going to be red hot. How do you see this competition shaking out?
Well, Georgia already has one edge rusher committed in Darren Akinebong out of the northern East Coast. So I think that they love that they have that in the fold. We got him trending for Isaiah Gibson. Bryce Davis is someone else that I like them for as he continues through his process. Bryce was at Clemson last weekend. He's at Duke this weekend, Georgia next weekend, South Carolina penciled in. I'm still riding with Georgia there. That would probably conclude the class. Jared Smith's a guy that's certainly near the top of the list too. I like the Gamecocks there. I haven't heard anything different. You know, Ole Miss got an official last month and that moved the needle. But I'm still with South Carolina for Jared Smith right now. I think Georgia would have to make up a lot of ground this weekend.
All right, and then we got two elite wide receivers on campus, and CJ Wiley and Derek Meadows. And I feel that CJ, obviously both are at the top of their board. They like them both a lot. They would take them both. But I feel like CJ Wiley, maybe pencil him in to Georgia's class, but Derek Meadows, more of a long shot here. Am I right in that?
Well, Derek Meadows visited Georgia this spring, and I was told that Kirby Smart was one of his favorite head coaches. I think Notre Dame may have the edge or the inches in this recruitment. He was just at Michigan this past weekend for a phenomenal visit. LSU's in there. Alabama, like we said at the top of the show, he's one of their most coveted players at wideout. I might say Alabama is near the top of the list with Notre Dame right now, but we'll see what happens with Georgia this weekend. But all eyes on CJ Wiley.
Right.
Travis Smith Jr. is someone that we think Georgia has a great shot to land at the wide receiver position. CJ Wiley is at the top of their board regardless of position as well. They're bad on LSU, Florida State. He was just at USC this past weekend. Georgia's really trying to make a big move with CJ Wiley this weekend. They think he's a special talent.
All right. Now, and I agree with you on Meadows. I think it's probably Notre Dame, maybe Alabama right there, 1A, 1B. But like you said, he's going to head to Athens this weekend. Anything can happen. Running back Todd Robinson, a really interesting story. Played quarterback, was a late eval. Georgia offered as a running back. His recruitment blew up. Now this weekend he's in Athens. Is this a guy that they could lock down this weekend?
And he was recently at camp for Georgia where he participated on both sides of the ball. I think he could play running back or in the secondary on the next level. He's a terrific player, as you said, dynamic under center. Chad Simmons has an on 3 RPM in favor of the Bulldogs. I have an on 3 RPM in favor of Georgia. So we like the way this is setting up for Georgia. And like we talked about before the first Georgia official visit weekend, Georgia's not messing around. They want guys to jump in right now, guys that we see out there that have decision timelines for down the road. That's out the window, man. Zayden Walker, he just committed today. I think we're going to see other guys that could pop sooner rather than later for Georgia. So I wouldn't be surprised if Todd Robinson's one of the next ones in the fold as well.
All right, Georgia fans, big weekend in Athens. Tap in, talk to us, comment section below. How do we feel about this weekend? Is Todd Robinson going to come off the board? Will there be any other surprises? Let us know. Comment section below. All right, let's head to Columbus, where we're looking at a big recruiting weekend for Ohio State and the Buckeyes. This week, they landed in-state running back Bo Jackson coming off a visit where he was really looking high at Ohio State. They end it. Let's bring in Steve Wiltfong because I want to hit on this. With Bo Jackson on board already at Ohio State, how does running back recruiting look moving forward?
Well, they want 2 more, Josh. Ohio State is expecting to lose Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins following the season, the best running back duo in the land. And they're going to need guys to come in right away that could give them some early playing time. Bo Jackson is someone that fits that bill.
Yeah.
They beat Georgia and Alabama for Bo Jackson. He was scheduled to be at Alabama later this month. He will no longer take that visit as he has locked his future in with the Buckeyes. I also like where Ohio State stands with the former SEC running back commit Isaiah West. He recently decommitted from Kentucky. He is a heavy trend for Ohio State going into his official visit this month. And then Jordan Davison. He is a 4-star running back out of California. I have an on-3 RPM prediction in favor of the Buckeyes. In fact, that was my first on-3 prediction I made when I joined this network on April 1. There's a lot of competition. Michigan is in the mix. He was just at Alabama this past weekend. But everything I hear still leads me to believe that Ohio State is the one to beat. Carlos Lachlan, new running backs coach who replaces Tony Alford, has Ohio State in position to recruit a special class at running back, and they need it. And if something falls through with any one of these guys, you got Anthony Turbo Rogers, who was recently on campus. He's committed to Alabama. You got Alvin Henderson out there currently committed to Penn State. There's a lot of guys that Ohio State could pivot to at running back, but I think they close out with Weston Davison as it stands now.
Yeah, Coach Lachlan wasting no time getting to it. He has a talented and deep recruiting board there at running back. All right, let's look ahead now to the weekend. Here we go, big visit weekend in Columbus. And let's talk safety Fahim Delaney out of the DMV area, the number 3 safety in America. This one's trending heavily to the Buckeyes. I feel like this could be one of these weekends where they could get him maybe to shut it down.
I like where Ohio State stands for Fahim Delaney coming into this visit. And look, his decision is based around player development, who can help get him to maximize his potential to hear his name called high in the NFL draft. And I think going into his visit this weekend, Ohio State's really going to be able to showcase that with how NFL scouts view Ohio State players and why their defense, their scheme, and the way they produce players through their strength coach, Mickey Marotti, and all of that puts them in position to get selected high. I think Ohio State is still the team to watch for Fahim Delaney as they battle Oregon, Maryland, and Virginia Tech.
All right, now wide receiver Quincy Porter out of New Jersey. He's going to be on campus this week. And we talked about Carlos Lachlan's running back board. The wide receiver board is equally as talented, equally as deep. Now, he is a top 10 wide receiver in America, top 50 player overall, trending to Michigan right now on the RPM. But, Steve, my question to you is how big of a priority is he for Brian Hartline in Ohio State?
If Quincy Porter wanted to commit to Ohio State yesterday, today, or tomorrow, he has a spot in the class. He was on campus earlier this spring. He is one of their top targets, like the ones they hosted last weekend, DeCorian Moore, Vernell Brown. Don't sleep on the Buckeyes for Vernell Brown III. And Dalen McCutcheon, he had a great visit. I could see Dalen McCutcheon ending up in Ohio State's class as well. Same goes with Quincy Porter. Obviously, they're battling Michigan there. He's looked at a few other schools, including Alabama and Penn State, where he took an official visit last weekend. But I think this one's setting up nicely for Ohio State to make another major move this weekend with their pedigree at the position.
All right, we'll see if they can shift the momentum away from Michigan. Speaking of shifting momentum, edge Damian Shanklin is on campus, and there was a big momentum shift in his recruitment over the weekend because you put in an expert pick for him to end up at LSU. Do you think that we could see another shift in this recruitment by the time the weekend's over?
All these recruitments are fluid, Josh. So, yes, my prediction is on LSU because Damian Shanklin said as much. LSU set the tone in his recruitment following his last 2 visits to Baton Rouge, which included the spring game and then his official visit this past weekend. But Ohio State is also another program I'm keeping a close eye on, them and Tennessee. So Ohio State, they were one of the later programs to offer, but it was a dream school type for him. It's less than 3 hours from his Indianapolis area home. Larry Johnson and what he's done historically. The Buckeyes program has a lot of weight around the Indianapolis area. So I could see Ohio State ultimately landing Damian Shanklin. They just have to leap over Ohio State beginning with this weekend's, or they have to leap over LSU beginning with this weekend's official visit.
All right, we'll see if the Buckeyes can jump the Tigers. Now, the last person I want to ask you about on our list is Jackson Lloyd. He's coming in from Carmel, California, and it looks right now to be an Alabama, Ohio State, USC battle. I know there's some other teams involved, but who do you like right now heading into the weekend?
Well, I have an on-3 RPM in favor of Alabama, but Ohio State has really come on here for Jackson Lloyd. When coaches were on the road, Justin Fry went out to California, offensive line coach, and saw him offered a scholarship. Jackson quickly got an unofficial visit on the books, loved Ohio State, loved the way he fit in with that program and their people. Now he's back for an official visit. So I view the Buckeyes as the biggest challenger to Alabama coming into the weekend. And Josh, 2 more names to keep an eye on this weekend for Ohio State. I recently put in an on-3 RPM in favor of the Buckeyes for 4-star offensive lineman Javen McFadden out of the DMV. Ohio State always does a great job in that part of the country. I think they're the one to beat for McFadden coming into his trip. And then on 300 defensive lineman Trajan Odom is another to watch. He was recently on campus for an unofficial visit. He's been to Columbus a couple times. He's looking at schools from coast to coast. He's playing his high school football in North Carolina, but he's from California, could play his college football for the Buckeyes. That one's starting to set up nicely.
It is. And Ohio State fans, how do you feel about the weekend coming up? Let us know. Comment section below. Any commitments, let us know. All right, big recruiting weekend at USC, and one of the biggest prospects in all of the country is going to be there, quarterback Julian Lewis. We're going to talk over it with Steve Wiltfong. Now, Steve, Juju Lewis makes his return to LA this weekend, official visit. We got to sit down and spend some time with Julian Lewis, and I certainly found out that he's much more locked into USC than I was giving him credit for. So this weekend, what does it mean for Julian Lewis and his recruitment and his commitment to the Trojans?
Well, on his last visit in the summer, Julian Lewis got a taste for what it would be like to just live in California. He was there for multiple days, just went shopping at some of the famous places out there, bounced around town and just got a feel for life on the West Coast. And he really dug that vibe. Lincoln Riley did the best job recruiting Julian Lewis, from the personal touch from the head coach. He's very involved, obviously, with the quarterback position. And Julian Lewis called him the best coach in the country because how involved Lincoln Riley is as the head coach, how involved he is as the offensive coordinator, and how involved he is as the quarterback's coach. He wears a lot of hats, and to get that kind of dedication to his position from the head coach is special. Never mind the fact that not only does any quarterback that starts for Lincoln Riley, he has the Midas touch with the Heisman trophies and the first round draft picks. So he always feels at home around Lincoln Riley. They sit together for hours on these visits, and that has really resonated. I think for Julian Lewis, he's most excited to kind of get a feel for how USC is going to finish this class. Are they going to hang on to Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson? Who else are they bringing in on defense? How are some of these young players that they recruited in these highly ranked recruiting classes beforehand, how are they developing? What kind of impact are they going to make as young players on USC's roster? How competitive can they be in the Big Ten? He knows the opportunity to play for Lincoln Riley. He's committed. He loves USC. He's obviously keeping the door open for some other programs. And I think he won't make a final decision until the fall, Josh. I think he's going to watch some games be played, see how USC looks, stack it up with Auburn, Colorado, and Indiana. Maybe some others come into play. But he's at USC this weekend. Then he's got Auburn. Then he's got Colorado. Then it's time for him to try and win a state championship. He's the defending Gatorade State Player of the Year in the Peach State. He was a finalist for Gatorade National Player of the Year. He's poised to have a huge season, and he's also trying to figure out exactly what his college future will be.
Yep. All right. A pair of elite Texas prospects also going to be on campus. Wide receiver Andrew Marsh and linebacker Riley Pettijohn. Looks like Marsh from Katy, Texas, or Pettijohn from McKinney, Texas, and both are going to be really tough to pull out of the state. Which one do you think USC has a better shot at?
Well, they've been in great shape for Andrew Marsh for much of his process. He's been on campus a ton, loves the offense, loves Coach Simmons. So I think that don't sleep on the Trojans for Andrew Marsh. I could see him playing his college football at USC. Riley Pettijohn was at Ohio State last weekend. There were some people that spent time with him. They think they're the biggest threat to Texas. Now, A&M and USC rounding out the top four. Pettijohn was at USC this spring. Coach Deontin Lynn really gives USC credibility with their defense for how quickly he was able to turn UCLA around in the same position, his NFL pedigree. So Riley Pettijohn's giving USC a good look, and we'll see if they can make a move. I certainly already think that USC is one of the front runners for Andrew Marsh.
All right. Well, Edge Justin Hill, you had a prediction in for Ohio State. He's now trending to the Buckeyes, but this weekend he's in California and he'll visit USC. They got a shot?
I think they got to make up ground on Ohio State first and foremost. Then you got Alabama. Then you got Oregon. So those are the four finalists. I would put USC fourth among that group for Justin Hill, but we'll see. There's some other guys that are coming in that they're in much better shape for, Josh. One name that's kind of new to the list is Dorian Brew, 5-star defensive back, originally slated to visit Texas this weekend, hearing he could visit USC instead. And we spent time with him at the Elite Series, On 3 Elite Series in Nashville last week. And USC and Ohio State were, my takeaway was those are the front runners in this recruitment. And LSU, Texas, some of the others trying to make a move. And I get the sense USC, could maybe have an inch or two on this, with Coach Bell, Coach Deontin Lynn, certainly Coach Riley. He's excited about USC. He's been there a couple times. He's an opportunity to play early for some coaches that he really likes for a program on the rise that's moving into the Big Ten. They like that LA vibe. So Dorian Brew, USC, that's looking good right now. But I'm still not sleeping on the Buckeyes either. He almost committed to Ohio State at one point in this process. His mom ran track there. It's a school that he's always been a fan of. And certainly Texas, LSU, and Oregon aren't going to go away. But USC in an interesting spot. And Chad Simmons and I recently in our Best Guess article picked USC for Dorian Brew. Noah McHale's got his final three, USC, Oregon, and Texas A&M, so big official visit there. And then Dalen McCutcheon's a blue chip receiver out of the Lone Star State as well that USC's on the short list for. They've gotten him to campus a couple times. And I wouldn't count out USC for Dalen McCutcheon.
All right. Let's head to the state of Texas. Talk a little Texas A&M. They got a bunch of big-time recruits on campus, including Ty Haywood, Michael Fasusi, Lamont Rogers, and Jonah Williams. A couple of these guys were favoring Texas A&M to sign. How big of a visit weekend is it for the Aggies?
Well, it's huge because Jonah Williams was just at USC this past weekend, and I think USC is in that top three with LSU and Texas A&M, a young man that's one of the best football players in the country, one of the best baseball players in the country. And USC, a program in interesting position to make a move there. But Texas A&M's where the on-3 RPM is for Jonah Williams. They get him back after getting him on campus a few times in the spring. Those offensive linemen, they had to make up ground with all of them, Coach Cushing, Coach Elko and company. They got Fasusi to campus several times during the fall. Them in Texas are certainly two that are in a really good spot. These him and Rogers were just at Missouri this past weekend, so Missouri's on the short list for each of them. And then Ty Haywood was at Alabama last weekend. Oklahoma's one of his favorites. A&M got him to campus twice, him and his mom. They're getting him back for a third time, so they're certainly chipping away and making a move with him as well.
All right. Now, let's get into your recent picks. Of course, this week you dropped that Isaiah Gibson. That was the headliner of your RPM picks this week. But there was more, and you did several to Stanford, a couple to Arkansas, Clemson. You want to talk through a couple of these?
Yeah, with Stanford, the big ones, 5-star offensive tackle Andrew Babalola. He was at Missouri this past weekend. He's already taken his official visit to Auburn, Stanford, and Oklahoma and Michigan, rounding out the list. He says he's still going to take his visits, but going into the rest of his trips and as he continues to have dialogue with coaches, I like where Stanford stands. I think it aligns with what he's looking to do academically and athletically. I think his family's high on Stanford. And he hasn't even taken the official visit yet. I expect the needle to really move this weekend when he gets to spend 48 hours with that coaching staff. Landon McComber and Adam Shovlin are a couple other RPMs in favor of Stanford. Wouldn't be surprised if those coveted defensive prospects aren't in the fold soon. Then you have Rowan Byrne, a coveted offensive lineman from out east who was at Clemson over the weekend. He now has a decision date set for Thursday, and I think that's setting up nicely for Clemson to land a commitment coming out of their biggest recruiting weekend of the year, Rowan Byrne to the Tigers. And that's it for today's episode of the Wiltfong Whip Around. Thanks for tuning in. Please hit like and subscribe. We'll be back next Monday to break down the biggest visits that happened over the weekend. There'll probably be some more On3 RPM picks, so stay locked into the On3 Recruits channel and Wiltfong Whip Around.